on the East Coast. We're starting 5 minutes later than we anticipated, but we're super excited.
But we're here.
On Twitter, on YouTube, LinkedIn. I am Amitza Mascati, and I am first and foremost a mixed race woman. My mom is from Puerto Rico, my dad is from India, and I'm so excited for those of you tuning in today. You feel free on whatever platform you're watching to say hi, to drop comments in the chat and questions. And we have the lovely Therese, who is coming into focus. I'm here in the Bay Area in the Valley, and this is Therese, who I'm really excited to chat with and introduce. Therese Morgan is first and foremost a dear friend of mine that I met acting in the Miami, Florida area, and she's coming to us live from the greater New York City area. So I'll let her
live from Queens.
Yes, from Queens, about her journey. But again, if you like what you see here, we have mixed race women. She's going to tell you about herself, her background, show her some love. She's a playwright. She's a creative. She's an artist. She's an educator like me. And I'm thrilled to have her here today, to be someone who has felt validated in joining in the experience that is mixed race. I feel moved, because I feel like we're sisters in that way.
Soul sisters, yes.
And that's the point. That's the point of what I'm seeing. For those of you that can see the title of this, this is about joining a mixed race women's collective and being a part of it. And if this is something that speaks to you, or you're curious about the experience of what it is like to grow up with different races, maybe different faiths, different cultures, stay tuned. So without further ado, I am so thrilled to chat with Therese. We have only said that this is what we're going to talk about, but as far as what comes out, what we share is live.
We're winging it.
We only tested audio and video yesterday, and shout out to my students at Rocket Fuerza in my former students that are now in 5th grade. They tuned in and were able to play with us and comment on YouTube. So Therese Morgan, tell us a little bit about yourself and anything you want to say.
Well, first of all, thank you, Amitza, for starting this little video series and platform. And she's one of those movers and shakers that make things happen. So I'm proud to be her friend. And so my name is Therese Morgan, and I am, well, relating to this chat, I am half Palestinian, half Southern American, hailing from Alabama. So I had a very polarized cultural experience growing up, and that is what we are here to talk about today. So what's the first thing that you've always wanted to ask another mixed race person, Amitza?
Well, I guess my thing is like, when I think about that, I can't, what's right there is like the question, like, who are you? Like, what are you? When people look at me and I'm like looking at my eyebrows right now that are not super clean.
Oh, girl, stop it.
And go, I see that hair. I see that smile. I see that skin tone. And I see someone like you. I'm starting with what people see, right? Our looks. And when someone looks at you, do you find, I feel like a common thing that I've spoken to with people of all genders, women, men, trans, anyone included, is like, people are like, what are you? And I get that a lot of people are.
I get that a lot too.
But I want to hear what's that like for you?
For me, I kind of like it. It's a fun, like, I'm always glad to have start a conversation with somebody. So if somebody's curious or brave enough or blunt enough to ask you, what are you? Then it's always fun to ask them that back. But I've had a lot of people, misguess what I am. People have asked me, like, are you half Black? Are you half Indian? Are you half Latina? Like, are you full Latina? Like, I'm a pretty tall girl, so they usually don't mistake me for any kind of person that they know to be a little bit shorter. But Yeah, it's fun for me. It's like a game. How about you?
You feel
What's the weirdest thing you've been mistaken for?
Oh my goodness, girl. Well, let me tell you this. I think what I first appreciate is that you kind of like it. And I think that's key. I recognize when people ask me like, what are you? For the longest time, I would say, well, guess. What do you think?
Yeah.
And I realized that on one hand, that was a way to kind of keep it playful and fun. I got to enjoy this journey of investigating on like, what is my, like, all right, since we're going to have a conversation about like, this is my identity, right? Like, why don't we explore this? Or this is my background. But on the other hand, I started seeing that by asking, like, what do you think this is? Like, what do you think? It was almost a way to evade or avoid like really actually owning it and kind of going deeper and like sometimes I'd be scared to sort of say it with pride. In the back of my mind, I'd be kind of afraid what people think, right?
Yeah.
But that's something that I kind of came to terms with and learned, like, hey, I'm Gujarican because I said so. I created that name, and I want a special shout out to my hometown. Anyone watching from our hometown, Edison, New Jersey, and Edison High. I remember.
Hi, Edison.
I remember joining. It's one of the most diverse public schools that I went to in the nation at the time. Now,
nice.
now probably now over 15 years ago. But when I was there, I was really like immersed in such different cultures, but people wanted to know, so what do you stand for? What do you represent? And I was like, how do I negotiate this? So we did volleyball for charity. I remember when we did things like that, on my back of my shirt, I wrote Gujarican. I was like, my dad speaks Gujarati. Mm-hmm. My mom is from Puerto Rico, and I made up my own. And I think that there is something to be said about
power to using language to shape your identity. Yeah.
Right. And like in a time where you're growing up, like as a teenager, a lot of times people want to know, like, what do you stand for? What are you about? How can we interact with each other? Right. And like, how do I connect with you? And I felt a lot of times like, like the other, like standardized tests. I guess my next question would be is like, did you ever experience like
the whole standardized test question? Yeah.
Other box, it really like, it kind of has you feel
well,
like, so I don't
know. Funnily enough,
funny.
A lot of people might not know this about Arab people in the United States, Arab citizens. Mm-hmm. When you fill out other on the standardized text or on voting census or on anything, they don't have a separate category for Arab Americans. They literally will read other, and then you put whatever you are, Syrian, Palestinian, Lebanese. They'll put it with the white people. Wow. They'll just put it in that pile. And I always thought that was strange, because I lived in a household where one parent was clearly white Anglo-American, and the other parent was clearly not. And to have the government try to put them together was a bit of an odd thing. So I hope that changes one day.
Yeah. So what would you say, speaking of changes, like, what would you say is something that you would like to see kind of change in the world regarding the like way I think you're perceived as mixed race, or maybe, what changes have you experienced also as someone of mixed race, like how you see that's influenced maybe like who you are, what you do, right? So either or both questions.
Well, something I'd like to see, a couple things I'd like to see change.
In the
world. I'd like to have diversity and mixed race be much more normal for everybody. I would like to be able to say, this is what I am, and have people not go, "Ooh, that's so exotic."
Yes.
Or and just be like, "Oh, that's cool. This is what I am." So I'd rather it not be put on a pedestal in some ways.
Yeah.
And what was the other question?
And I mean, how do you see that being someone of mixed race? How do you feel like it has influenced like how how you're raised, like, and what it is that you do today, right? Because I know you're a playwright, you're a creative. I don't think you're alone in this. I've encountered a lot of mixed race folks. Some of the most famous people have all these backgrounds, and I think there's something to say about embracing different cultures and religions.
Yeah, well, it definitely makes you. It's growing up. I could never really completely take one side or another.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, in situations where I would hear people talk about either one of my parents' nationalities as sort of like the other. And so I always felt like, because I've, been born with this unique identity, that it gives me a sort of an insight into both. And so when I move through the adult world, it's sort of a little bit of an opportunity to create a little more change than I might have been able to if I only had one race perspective.
Yeah.
So I consider that a plus and a little bit of a responsibility on my part, because people do look at me and they can't box me into one or the other. So it makes people a little more open to hearing both sides. So I try to use it. That's basically what I'm trying to say. I try to use it to help make people think more tolerantly, more accepting.
Yeah. No, 100%. I often feel like there's this duty that I have as well to ensure that people get that in many ways we are very, like, someone who's born with these different cultures and backgrounds is just another human being, right? In the best of ways we can relate.
Mm-hmm.
But you're raised and you know that maybe your mom's family does a lot of these types of things and your dad's family does a lot of these type of things. Those are cultures too.
Yeah.
I think where it becomes a little bit more intense or extreme or distinct is like when, my life looked like Christmases and it still looks like Christmases in Puerto Rico. It's like hearing the Spanish, enjoying the food, going to midnight mass, experiencing the culture and the religion, going to Catholic church, right? And so there was this other component of faith too, which is part of that overall
Definitely.
culture.
Yeah.
And I'm
very strongly tied
too. And
sometimes.
And then on my dad's side, it's like hearing Gujarati and attending, again, in Edison, growing up in Edison, it's a hugely diverse, but very, a huge majority of South Asians and Indians, and connecting to like, wow, I'm this, like, when I was with the Indian groups, they're like, oh, that's that Gujarati girl. There's that Puerto Rican, like, she's got the Puerto Rican spice, and looking to label and to pinpoint, like, all right, that's that. And shout out to Aaron, who's Catano, who's watching, white and Puerto Rican. We appreciate you for tuning in. Like, it's like looking for things and being like, oh, that's the Puerto Rican in you. I was like, I'm sorry, do you have the textbook on Puerto Ricanism?
Oh, yeah.
And so kind of finding it to be interesting, like people love to figure things out. We love to know, right? And to kind of figure out,
people love to sort of like look for patterns.
Yeah, but like, right, like, oh, that's that in you. That's how you got to be that way. And that's fair. But I think I think something that I felt empowered is that this in being mixed race and feeling like I have tools. This is a privilege. I have more tools in my toolbox and kit of what it looks like to actually define who I am. Like,
yeah, you kind of get to like pick and choose almost. if you grow up with two different cultures, then like once you're an adult and you become more independent from your, you know, nuclear family, then you get to choose what you want to keep.
Yeah, and
what you want to not keep.
Exactly. And you're like, all right, well, not too crazy about that, right? But then even so, like I said, even being it like South Asian and Indian, and as someone who might look like an Indian woman, right? But maybe I actually didn't have an opportunity. I have a very cursory level of Hindi and Gujarati under my belt. But meanwhile,
I'm trying to learn Arabic.
Hey, and so that's like, you know, mashallah, it's great, right? We can learn bits and pieces of Arabic, but then on the meantime, you know, given where I grew up in the United States, and given what I was connected to, my mother tongue, my parents told me I was conceived in Puerto Rico. So, hey, Puerto Rico. It sounds like I've had this exposure to be, you know, to speak Spanish. And so I took it all the way. I studied it in school. Spanish was offered in public schools when Gujarati and Hindi were not in the schools I grew up in, right? There was a different formality around it, huge language to use. And
same with me too. I learned Spanish in school because my parents, I mean, we lived in Miami, so my parents wanted me to learn Spanish, but there was no Arabic offered until college.
Yeah, exactly. So, and exactly with that being said, like if you have any questions for myself or Therese about the mixed race women's experience, you want to have any shout outs, like we said, we heard some folks that are mixed race watching, feel free to ask questions.
Yeah, let us know you're here, guys. We want to know, you know, who's here at the party and what you want to know. If there's anything you've wanted to ask a person of any of the races that we represent, then ask away.
And I love that
we are here for you.
Amy Sharp is training, but sending love and kisses. Like we said, Aaron is here in Puerto Rico, and we have other folks watching. Therese is sharing. You know, I want to know specifically to like, you know, what I think something that we spoke about, right? You're talking about being Palestinian and from Alabama, right? And your dad's from Alabama. And then, you know, I mentioned as well too, you know, my mom is from Puerto Rico and my dad is from India. And I just wonder, like, the funny thing about that is that we as women, like, have connected. I feel like when we met, you know, we met through the performing arts. And I think a lot of being creative allows you to kind of have the freedom to play with like taking a little bit of this, a little bit of that, fusion, diversity, right? Which is what you do when you create, right? You say, okay, what if I could have a character that looked like this, or if I could play this part, but portray it differently. And I have often felt that, like, given not only, like we mentioned, this duty to represent our cultures, I've also felt, you know, and have this toolkit, I have felt that because we've had this background, it's set us up to be particularly creative.
Yeah, I remember us talking about this a long time ago. Yeah.
I felt like that has us relate. I feel like we got along, and I was like, is it the mixed race? Is it the creative thing? And what do you think about that?
Is that the Puerto Rican in you?
Is that the Palestinian in you?
I won't go so far as to say that mixed race people are more creative than people who grow up with a single race or culture. That doesn't feel fair, but
not more than, but like an inclination to be. What do you think?
I think, well, in my case, I feel like being mixed race has into the many parts of me that I wanted to express, but didn't see represented around me, and didn't feel like I knew a place where those parts of me could be expressed and received and supported and grow. So that played into it a little bit. Also, I just have a lot of stories from my mom's side, from my Palestinian side, that I feel need to be told. And I'm hoping, you know, that in the future I can get those stories out into shows in the form of like theater or poetry or you know, all of the stuff I love to write. But yeah, it's been interesting growing up with a bicultural household where one parent's culture is far more represented than the other parent's culture. And I will say that for not just Palestinians, but all Arab Americans, I feel like I have had to search a lot to find the Arab Americans who have been in the public light. So
Arab Americans.
That's something I hope for the future, that we can get a little more representation for my mom's people.
Or like what it looks like to be Arab American. And so, you know, I think have you found, I wonder, like, do you find this, you know, I shared on Monday from this very spot, this inspiration to create this mixed race women's collective, which, by the way, is a group that I created today and have invited folks to. And the idea is to share this conversation programming with one another. I've, to be honest, I have looked on Facebook, and there's mixed race babies, mixed race blood for specific racial groups. There's like in general, but it's really specific to women. I've only seen one group that I intend to reach out to and collaborate with, but really I'm excited about this experience that we can kind of have these conversations. And the word that you said, interestingly enough, was when you saw me share earlier this week, was thanks for the validation. And that really resonated, and I send you a lot of love there, because I think that there is something to say about feeling valued for having this
valued and validation, slightly different, but very close.
Right. And so I'd love for you to speak to both when it comes to that feeling valued and feeling validated in that, rather than being perceived as like, well, like, I don't fully get or fully relate to that or connect to the experience. And there's a deeper, along with that, there's this bigger sense of like what it looks like to belong to groups. Okay, if I want to find out more about my Arab American culture, for you, you'd be going that way. If I want to find out more about this, I'll be delving into these like homogenous groups, right? Rather than what it might look like to jump into a mixed race group of women who also experience kind of negotiating these different cultures.
There's definitely, I mean, there's a very different experience between mixed race people and people of one race or culture. And I'm glad we have spaces, including this little space, for people to talk about that. What do you think is one sort of aspect or feeling that mixed race people feel through their lives or growing up that people of one race may not feel?
I think fully feeling accepted for the colorful experience, right? For the multifaceted identity, and fully getting it. I think that's something that a lot of women don't always, I'm speaking about women, but really any mixed race, but I think especially like for women, you know, that are coming to terms in like who I am, right? As a woman growing up and navigating in experiences, like feeling gotten that way, if that makes sense, right? Like that, I get what you go through. I get that one day you might wake up and you're looking like, I have pictures growing up where I look like I'm a chameleon. I like change races, and and like none of this is a problem, right? None of this is a problem. This is like, this is cool. It's like being a prism that when you twist the light, it shines in different, like being a prism, right? That I can look one day, I look more Indian in a picture. I look more Puerto Rican. It's great for in the arts. I'm racially ambiguous. I can play almost any type of character, really, like almost. And it's but the thing is, but navigating that as a child, when people, and even as an adult, when people are kind of looking to see like where, like I feel like looking to see like, where do I fit? Where do I belong? Right. And I recognize, I think something I've negotiated after a while for myself was like, well, there's places I'm born to fit in, but really in many ways, I think we have this blessing as mixed race folks, and even more so as women, to stand out, to shine, to share our voice and our light in
and
special
like
ways.
there's what was I going to say? What you said about being a prism, it's rare that you meet somebody who can understand and see you as all that you are instead of seeing you through pieces of yourself. That's one of the things I found in having this sort of unique racial and cultural identity, is that like people will either see me as somebody different, the other person, or they will see me as, oh, you're one of us, instead of seeing, everyone as a unique expression of life, and seeing you as you are, instead of pushing you away or bringing you closer, just letting you be somewhere in the middle.
Wow.
And so that's another thing that I think mixed race people experience, and anyone who has a strong mix of two, whether it be like religious identity or I don't know, location identity or something like that, or people who are queer also, who don't fit into straight or gay. They're somewhere in between, and I hope and I wish and I think that the world is moving in the direction of being able to just let people be as they are in their identity without trying to move them closer or further away, as far as relationships go.
Totally. So that's beautiful. And that brings me to,
and I saw that, sorry.
Go ahead.
That's something I saw growing up between people who identified solely in culture of one of my parents or the other. I would hear people, I would be in certain spaces, like for example with my dad, where they would talk about people of my mom's culture, not always in a good way, and he would never talk about it in a bad way, but like there were people who in the space of being just in his culture would be talking about my mom's culture as sort of the other, or like the strange people out there, or like the people who, to quote one neighbor, I won't say his name, but he said, oh, yeah, those Arabs and how they eat their camel meat. And I was just like, nope, they don't do that. And or I think it was my sister who was there for that conversation, but yeah, it's been really crazy and weird to see just how narrow people's views and ideas are of other cultures, but also being able to be in those spaces and be like, no, look, this is how it is, like this is how reality is, that Arabs don't eat camels. And so and that's not to say that people like of my mom's culture or on my mom's side are saints or anything. Like, thing that was a wake-up call to me growing up is that like I have lived in these two very different cultures, but there's racism on both sides, and there's prejudice in every race, every culture, toward every race, every culture, and so it's been it's made me very, very conscious of prejudice, and hopefully not prejudiced. I don't think I am.
100%. But thank you so much for bringing up that aspect of of seeing that like racism doesn't just exist like over there with one group with like I think sometimes white folks gotta get a lot of flack rather for like white people are racist against people of color. It's like no. it's a mindset and an attitude, unfortunately, that can be pervasive everywhere, right? Like,
Yeah,
there
it happens, from every culture to every culture.
like exactly. And so even
It's just
negotiating,
about fear.
yeah, and like what you
Hmm.
said, even negotiating what that looks like for you to, like, in your own family, be like, I have this Palestinian family, right? Or this family from Alabama that thinks this about the other side, right? And
Um,
or other, or
I
like,
didn't see. Yeah, well, let me clarify. I didn't see. I didn't witness any kind of hate
okay,
from members of my family to other members of my family. Um, I have only ever seen it in people who are sort of more loosely
connected.
um, associated with either of my parents. So.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, right? Like, people, like what you said, it's fear. Like, people, what we don't know, what we don't know sometimes about things, right? And what we don't know, we make assumptions, and that isn't.
Yeah, and a lot of it, like, and that's also something that, like, I sort of uh, realized growing up, is that, like, a lot of times people aren't trying to hate. They just don't know. They just haven't, like, been exposed to someone of a certain culture, or they just have only ever heard things from other people that might not be correct, and so, like, they'll spout out these things that they have heard without, consciously thinking of, is that really true? So a lot of and also, like, there's something to be said for the people. There's a very big difference between the people who ask you questions and the people who make statements about you. And the people who are
The people.
asking you questions about yourself want to learn,
Mhm.
and they're open enough, they're brave enough to ask you about this thing that they don't know about, or this culture. And so it's important, um, not to I'm getting preachy now, but um, I found that if I was more open to people asking questions, and sort of stepped in to those conversations sort of with a happiness, then it worked out really well, and it was an opportunity, to know we're teachers, and that's what we love to do. And
Yes. Speaking of which, we've been speaking so. Ooh, I just want to acknowledge, like, the air, the Silicon Valley, like, area
you have a
air
nice
that is
breeze where
like,
you are.
oh yes, it's like it's all up in here. It
Beautiful.
loves every time we share, every time we get deep, every time we talk about some of this transformative experience. It's thank you, nature, Mother Nature. It's all here. But we've jumped right in and spoken a lot about the mixed race experience. Um, and that's great. And also, for those of folks watching, right, like, if you're interested in joining, especially as a mixed race woman, if this is a call, it's like calling all mixed race women. If that's you, want to share, you want to come on here next and talk about your experience, this is some level of, it's validation, it's community, it's appreciation, connection, support, acceptance, all that
Yeah,
jazz.
it's a place where you can just share whatever you have to share about your
And
experiences.
yeah, and so that being said, right, all of these experiences, I think the point is that they make us all like anybody's experiences, but so uniquely you. So we've been speaking about the mixed race experience, right, in general, and that's something that I intend to do on each of these conversations, episodes, and these series, kicking it off with Therese Morgan. But Therese, I'd love to know a little bit, more about you as like, I know a lot about you, but also for our viewers and folks watching, like, what you want to share in about yourself, right? You mentioned about you, about your career, about what you're up to. It's a lot of this is about getting to know each other. Like, who are the ladies? Like, what did this beautiful combination of a Palestinian mom and Alabama create in growing up in Florida, right? So tell us a little bit more, like, about yourself, what you're up to, and who you might look to connect with. In your new space, which I know is in New York. So I want to hear all about that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a writer and composer and educator. Um, my education background is in music and education. But I've been doing creative writing, poetry, prose, long stories, novels since I was very young. And I've recently moved to New York City from Miami, and I'm hoping to connect and make new friends in the performing arts. I've also done acting professionally. But yeah, looking to keep telling stories and writing new shows. Right now, I have a poetry tourism blog called NYC Poem One
Nice.
on Facebook, and it's just a way that I can see now that New York City is opening back up again,
Yeah.
slowly but surely. I write a new poem for every new place or experience that I have in New York City, and I post it every weekday. So that's my latest project.
That's awesome. And so you're coming to us right now from your apartment in Queens, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
It is a bright and beautiful day in
a ukulele over there.
Queens, New York.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm glad. I'm glad. I was checking too. We've kind of you've fuzzed out sometimes and been clear, but you're clear right now on the screen. Can you hear and see me?
Oh, okay, good.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So no, that's awesome. I am so glad and excited for you and your tourism, your poetry, and your creativity, and your writing and composing, and your a lovely place in New York, but also. Know that you have a family here too with the Mixed Race Women's Collective and virtually, nationally, internationally, and just really excited to have you as a friend, as a human being in my life, and
likewise, girl.
that like, jumps on board to have these types of conversations and just vibe. This is some Friday vibes. Just chatting. Yeah. Kick off the first weekend of November. And if anybody again watching, I'm so grateful to those that have been watching and commenting and represent. If you have any questions or anything you want to say, I know we've had a few folks tuning in along the way to hear about this. And if there's anyone else who has any questions or comments, feel free to share them. This is on Facebook. This is on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. This is on Twitter, Amitza M and Amitza Mascati everywhere else. I'm really excited. And also, Therese, if there's any particular place you want to share about your blog in the blog, or something you want to share, if you could see if there's a way you can drop it in the chat on our Restream. I want to thank Restream for sponsoring this. You can type it.
They didn't sponsor us.
Yeah, they are.
Restream is not paying us to do this.
They are sponsoring us. They will be. They are.
Maybe, yeah.
There's literally everywhere it says they are sponsoring us because they have made this possible. Restream is it's something where the default is like sponsored by Restream. So if you want to have your video on multiple platforms, we're in the Restream studio right now, studio.restream.io. So I appreciate them for that because they are making this possible. Do you have a link? A link that you want to drop in the chat, or if not, I can drop it in the chat so that people can see where you are, where your blog is at.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Let me. Can I post the link?
See if you can in the chat, and if not, I can always put it up there for you. And in the meantime, we have a few folks watching, so if you have any questions, any thoughts, we love it. We love all the love. Love all the love, all the love. And
I have a question for the meantime.
Yeah, what's up?
For you, Amitza. What's the thing? What is your favorite moment that was brought about by your unique mixed race experience? Like, is there a moment that you can remember where you thought, wow, this is such a great coming together of my two cultures, or this is like such a moment of acceptance from people?
Oh
Can
yeah.
you think of anything? Mm-hmm.
Yes. 100%. And I'm really glad that you asked that, because I did want to, you know, we've been focusing on sometimes some of the struggles or some of the challenges, but there's so much that's so exciting and so good about the mixed race experience and validating that and connecting with women and sharing about it. Anytime I travel, anytime I meet new people, when I teach Zumba, it's all of these things that really have own, like when I'm traveling and I'm able to turn to someone and connect with them because of because they're from India, and then turn to somebody else that's from a different South American country and speak to them in Spanish. It's just pretty awesome.
That's cool. Yeah.
It's really great to connect when I am teaching Zumba, and I love the salsa, merengue, bachata, and I also love the Bollywood, and it feels very connected to like my mom and my dad and my family and cultures. That's really awesome. So there's plenty of that.
That's really cool.
What about you? Is there a moment where you're like, yes, or a moment where you were like, yes, or just a general vibe, a general place in life that you feel really proud of your mixed race culture?
Well, I always felt really happy when I was much younger and my mom's and my dad's family would come for Christmas, and to just see. I didn't back then. I was like very young, so I didn't really think of it in a cultural perspective.
Yeah.
But it was great to see both sides of my family, who were quite different from each other, coming together and just enjoying each other's company and having fun. So it was cool.
Oh, that's
because it was always like very it's such a different vibe for both sides of my family. When I would like spend any kind of weekend or whatever with my mom's family, like it's much more everyone's much more like loud.
You're like Palestinian family. Everyone
in the best way. Everyone's like much more loud, and it's a much more sort of what's the word? I don't know. It's
boisterous,
lively, boisterous maybe, but like it was so interesting, like growing up, going from like one sort of household to another. Like we go to my grandma's house on Sundays for a long time growing up, and so having everybody there and everybody sort of being like loud and like everybody's like in asking you about like what's in your life now, like, and getting into like the big like conversations. And then like you go to my dad's side of the family, and like they're very sweet, very nice, very like welcoming, and they're like much more like subdued and like sort of like calm, I guess is the word. It was just like, it was so interesting to go from like one vibe to another vibe, and also seeing like the care and the love in both of those environments. So it was cool.
That is awesome. Yeah, no, it's just like how different people, right? How different people connect with each other and how different people interact with each other. So 100%. I am so blessed that we've had this conversation. I am also making sure that your folks on Facebook, you are tagged. They know that we've had this conversation. Are excited to have this conversation. What's up?
So people can see. I wasn't able to put the name of the poetry blog in the chat. I don't know if you can do it on your end, but if you can just put the NYC Poem 1 title, the caption where you have it, just so people can read it and see what it is.
Can you chat it to me? How it's
for whatever reason the chat's not working on my side, but the name of the blog is literally NYC Poem 1.
Okay.
That's on Facebook.
If you want to get there, you just go to NYC. You just search NYC Poem 1.
Yeah, search NYC Poem 1, or you can just type in facebook.com/NYC Poem 1. Facebook.com/NYC Poem 1. All right.
am going to put that. I see it. Oh, I see it right now. So I am I'm looking at it right now. I wonder if we could share that. I'm going to put that right here so folks can see, and put that up here. This is it, right?
There we go.
NYC
Yeah.
Poem 1. So this, Therese, tell us one more time. This, if you click on NYC Poem 1, you will see what?
You will see my tourism poetry blog, where you can get poetic insights into all of the new things opening up and cool places to see in New York City,
Awesome.
and a little dose of creative writing.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, this is creative, right? This is beautiful. I'm looking at it right now. It's beautiful creative writing. You have some stuff that you just saw around, I guess, right around Halloween time, right? And just after the fact. That is fantastic. I am so excited, and just so you know, awesome stuff. And if you are, again, you've enjoyed this conversation, you'd like to be a part of this conversation, you are a mixed race woman as well, or you know a mixed race woman that you think might really enjoy just connecting, vibing, sharing, chatting, and talking about the mixed race experience. That is, if you find the Mixed Race Women Collective Facebook group, again, fresh. It's off the press. It created today. I've invited some of you that I know, but feel free to also find this, search it, and join. But it's been great. So great talking to you, Therese. I'm so happy.
You too.
Join us in the group, Therese, so that we can keep having conversations.
Yeah, for sure.
Go
Everybody
live.
who's watching, give Amita a round of applause for starting this series.
Oh,
yay!
I appreciate Therese literally jumping on and riding these waves and testing out all these different platforms powered by Restream, all that good stuff. So lots of love. I hope you have a really great rest of the day. I guess it's just about wrapping up lunch hour, and I am about to go and teach today, teach Spanish.
Woo-hoo!
I get to teach Spanish, I get to teach art, have lunchtime, teach some students reading, and keep having some good Friday vibes and kicking off the weekend here. So I hope you have a good weekend too, and talk to you everybody soon.
Yeah, bye. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thanks for watching.